This is a relay project.
Seriously?
Seriously starts now. Here's Supriya and Ryan.
Yo, it's Wednesday, January 4th, and you're listening to Seriously with Supriya and Ryan. I am Supriya Devetti in Toronto.
I'm Ryan Jesperson in Edmonton, and you are turbocharged on this first episode of 2023. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too. Yeah, 2023. A big sort of, a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks that we're going to sort of get to because we've been off for a bit. I have to, even though I'm not a sports person, I think everyone knows that at this point. I'm particularly not really a football person on top of it, but we have to talk about what happened on Monday night.
Yeah, Damar Hamlin, Buffalo Bills star, down a cardiac. I'm just gonna say it's a cardiac incident that happened on the field. He collapsed on the field following what looked to be kind of like just a standard tackle, like just the average NFL play. Which let me offer that with the caveat that none of us mere mortals, none of us basic humans have any understanding what the physical implications of the average NFL play or NFL collision would be. But obviously a shocking aftermath as he goes down, collapses, and is at the time that you and I are talking remains in a coma. But some positive signs say the doctors that are providing him care right now. The world is watching this story, Supriya. You don't see stuff like this happen. Are you a little bit surprised at that, actually?
I am. I am. So I was, not necessarily, I wasn't watching the game, but on my Twitter feed that night, everyone was basically talking about it. And it didn't matter whether they were a sports person or not. If you were a news person, it was news. And it was, important news because, 24-year-old guy collapses on the field. 9 minutes, they're performing, CPR on him or trying to, get him back. His heart did come back, and he was taken off. And in most instances, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the NFL normally goes on with the game, do they not? Like it's rare for them to sort of pull back and to postpone.
Yeah, extremely rare. And I think that, I'm finding there are conflicting reports on this. There's a lot of, speculation swirling around in 100 different angles of approach to this story. And one of them is who made the call ultimately, or who dug in their heels on not continuing with that game. Some people are saying that it was the head coaches of both teams. A lot of people are saying it was the players defiantly refusing to take back to the field. And then, of course, a lot of people reading into how long the NFL may or may not have taken to make a decision to postpone that game. The game has implications, obviously. Skip Bayless, the controversial American sports commentator, found himself up to the shit, up to his eyeballs for his, noting that he was a little bit surprised that the game was going to be postponed, said that there are big implications to the game, and people grinding his gears for that for good reason. But man, oh man, this is it's like to see. I know people are comparing it to the Chris Pronger incident. Feels like an eternity ago in the playoffs. The Hall of Fame defenseman takes a slap shot to the chest, hits him just in that, I was going to say the right spot, hits him just in the wrong, spot, this kind of 1 in a million circumstance that stopped his heart as well. He made a full recovery. That was game 2. He was back in the series playing in game 3, which is remarkable. The Hamlin story feels like it's a little bit different with the breathing tube and all of that. He's fully intubated. As we're talking about this, people with their hearts in their throats, like millions of people. And like you said, not all of them football fans.
Yeah, and the other aspect to this, in terms of, you were pointing out a bunch of theories, there's a lot of fucking disinformation out there as well, claiming that this is because of vaccines for COVID, which is just
myocarditis, people are saying.
Yeah, which is just like an added layer of ghoulishness, I think, as, Damar Hamlin's family and his teammates and his friends and people who love him and know him and, are really rooting for him to get better, have to be subject to that sort of shit. So, but, I guess that's just the age we live in now.
Well, and it's stupid. Like, I've got a couple quick thoughts on this. I feel like, how sometimes in life you got those things where you're like, I don't even want to give this airtime. I don't even want to give this attention. But also you feel like you need to. People are going to, someone could be hit by a car in a crosswalk and anti-vaxxers will make it about their vaccine status, right? Like it doesn't matter. It's ridiculous. It's disrespectful, like you said, but I'm not just trying to sit here on a pedestal. I just think it's idiotic. I think it's moronic, to be quite honest. You know the Vancouver-based radio personality Drex. He's like, 40 basically. He's like barely into his midlife and suffered a heart attack back in December. I talked to him and it was amazing. He had been openly, like many people with public platforms did, through the course of the pandemic, encouraging people to get vaccinated. And so it was public knowledge that he was vaccinated. And of course, he's a public figure, so he has his haters and he has his critics. And he's not afraid to clap back at him, which can oftentimes exacerbate the problem. When he had his heart attack, there were people cheering for it. There were people laughing. There were people that were applauding the fact that it proved 18 months after he was vaccinated, by the way, that his heart attack was a result of that vaccine. And I talked to him about that. People can check out the interview in the Real Talk archives. But it just goes to show no low is too low, Supriya.
Yeah. You know what we need to do, though? We need to do a Chorus Radio reunion episode where it's like me, you, Drex, Adler. Yeah, Daniel Smith.
Daniel Smith can join us. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I can imagine, actually. That's a great fucking idea. Let's do that in 2023 on Seriously. That would be unreal. We get the premier on. I'd like to put her and Adler together because he's not pulling any punches. Did you see he officially endorsed the one of Canada's most prominent conservative talk radio hosts in our nation's history? I'm talking Charles Adler on New Year's Eve endorses Rachel Notley unprompted. Pretty wild stuff. The follow conservatives didn't like it.
Yeah. It just occurred to me that 2019 talk radio election panel. None of us are there.
Literally
anymore.
None of us. Literally
you,
none.
Me, Adler, Danielle. Yeah.
You, me, Adler, Danielle. One of us has gone on to become a Canadian premier. And the other
rest of us are still kicking about.
I'm not sure what we're doing. So, I heard Manitoba's having an election. Maybe there's an opening for one of us there. Yeah, that could be coming up later this year. Hey, so here's a story from your neck of the woods, right? The global ransomware operator issued an apology. This is wild. I don't know if people are paying attention to it, but offering to unlock data targeted in a ransomware attack on Toronto's hospital for sick children. Can you bring us up to speed on this?
Yeah, so it's this global ransomware group called Lockbit, and they offered what experts are saying is a super rare apology, and they're offering to settle things and get everything back for them. And the story in and of itself is super troubling, but it's a good reminder of how important it is to make sure your team gets proper training on cybersecurity, no matter what industry they're working in.
Yeah, to say the very least, right? In fact, working with a training partner like our title sponsor, We Know Training, can help protect your business from risks just like these. Their expert e-learning team designs training that actually changes behavior so that your employees will retain and act on what they learn.
Exactly. And We Know Training specializes in training for regulated industries, and they are just so much more than your regular standard LMS.
Yeah, that's right. They do it all, from creating to hosting to selling your courses and even optimizing them to make sure that you see real business results.
So if you need to train your team, they offer a scalable solution that's ideal for high-stakes training that really matters.
If you want to work with a training partner that truly understands your needs, has solutions to your challenges, and delivers amazing value against your business goals, talk to We Know Training.
You can visit their website at weknowtraining.ca.
The Lead.
Your predecessor, Erin O'Toole, has written a blog basically saying he would like to see fewer F Trudeau flags. He says they are a symptom of a larger problem in which rage is being normalized, which in turn is hurting our democracy. I'd like your thoughts on those flags and Mr. O'Toole's concerns that, again, rage is being normalized and hurting democracy.
Well, I don't like the flags, and I don't like rage, but I think we have to ask ourselves, why are people so angry? Like, why are people so angry? And the answer is that they're hurting. It's easy for the political establishment to say, stop all your complaining. But when you're one of the 1.5 million people that went to a food bank in the month of March, it's not so easy. If you're one of the people that went to the Mississauga food bank and asked for help with medical assistance in dying, not because you're sick, but because you can't afford to live, it's not so easy. If you're one of the 38-year-olds living in your parents' basement because it now takes more of a monthly paycheck to own a house than at any time in recorded history, it's not so easy to be happy with the way things are going.
So that was during Pierre Poilievre's year-end press conference that he gave, and he was peppered with a bunch of questions, that being one of them, about Erin O'Toole writing this Substack post that he did. It's called Disordered Liberty. And, he kind of gets into what he thinks is problematic about our current political discourse, pointing out that these, F Trudeau flags that are, pretty much ubiquitous nowadays, are really hurting our, our democracy, our discourse, how we can relate to one another. And he talks about how it is dangerous for, the vast majority of reasonable people to become complacent about this sort of thing. And he goes into, the far left and the far right, both equally contributing to the, current environment. And I don't know, he makes a lot of good points. And, Pierre Poilievre's answer was very good as well to the question, right?
Really good.
But I think they're both full of shit. Well,
of course they are. They're politicians. They're all full of shit.
Yeah, I mean, they all are full of shit. I will, concede that. But it's does he not think he had any sort of role in the way our current political environment has played out?
Of course he does.
Yeah. Does he not know that? So then why put out that blog post? It's he absolves himself completely of any responsibility. And look, I'm one of these people that I think if a politician has a change of heart, or if they've realized something, then we should, I hate it when people are like, oh, he's a flip-flopper, she's a flip-flopper. It's no, fuck, they learned something, and we should all be welcoming the fact that they learned something, right? I think a very good example of that is Michelle Rempel-Garner, who in, the last couple of years has been apologizing for the way conservatives have gone about the, barbaric practices tip line, the niqab citizen ceremony ban, or how the party dealt with the motion to condemn Islamophobia. That's a real sort of evolution, I think.
Isn't it wild?
Thinking.
Sorry to interrupt. Isn't it wild to see how Michelle Rempel-Garner has gone from arguably the biggest rising star in the Conservative Party to a pariah?
Well, yeah, and why do you think that is? Is it because she's speaking out about this shit?
Well, for sure, but I'm just saying, hers was a change of course. I don't see it the same as Michael Chong, for whatever reason, not realizing that potential to be the next big conservative star. I think it's different reasons. Chong has plotted out and maintained a little bit more of a so-called, pardon the reference, progressive conservative path, and others have as well. And then there have been some departures of some huge names. I don't know, why John Baird comes to as an example, but there's tons of them that we could invoke. Peter MacKay,
John Baird, James Moore, Ronna Ambrose,
et cetera, et cetera. Exactly, right? You could name a dozen. But Michelle Rempel was not that. She, when Jason Kenney had his sharp words and was elected and effectively campaigned, 2017 and won that election in 2019, and she was the big backer, and it was Kenney and Rempel and these conservative heavyweights, and then all of a sudden she kind of had her own. I don't know if it was what was it? Was it that she was down in the States and watching from afar and had a different lens on it? I don't know what it was, but I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, I don't really know either, but I think it was just sincere listening. And I don't know if that makes me naive.
Maybe.
But I think she just heard what people had to say, particularly those within the Muslim community, and was oh, fuck, okay. Yeah, all right.
You're talking about that specific issue of the barbaric cultural practices. Yeah, sure.
I am. And I mean, Michelle has arguably also led that party quite a bit when it comes to issues relating to the LGBTQ community as well, right? Yeah. So she's been a real champion for those sorts of causes. And I don't know. So back to Erin O'Toole, I mean, I just think it's a little rich that the guy who, couldn't win a leadership campaign without him painting himself as a true blue candidate, in that leadership race, that he was railing against, leftist campus culture and all these other culture wars stuff that he was importing from the States with the help of a lot of, digital backers like the Canada Proud team. It's kind of rich to see him now being what happened? Why are we all so angry? And it's I just don't get it. And it's very similar to what Jason Kenney did in his resignation letter.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, I actually think that's a perfect comparison. Jason Kenney lamenting the current state of politics just to me is like the richer than maple syrup. I just thought that was absolutely comical. Because I think he's arguably been the biggest igniter over the past 5 years. I mean, aside from maybe like Jordan Peterson or somebody else, but I'm talking with actual political players.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah, like in the arena of politics, he'd probably lay it at the feet of Kenney until Pierre Poilievre enters the chat, and like for Pierre Poilievre, I mean, I actually think that his response to that question, it's number one, he wasn't talking about, the F Trudeau flags. He could have taken it in the direction of like decorum in politics or keeping it classy, or, it's not about what Trudeau's doing, it's what we would do, and like provide a solution and the positive type of politicking that people indicate that they'd like to see, although the negative politicking seems to be the most effective. But of course, he, as effective leaders do, twists that, or at least steers it over to fit the narrative that he's going to campaign on over the next couple of years. And it's very convenient if you're an opposition politician, not to be so cynical, but it's very convenient if you're in recession and if mortgage rates are high and if people are underwater, because you just need to point out the obvious to get some pretty strong support. And that's exactly what he's going to continue to do, and he's doing it well.
Yeah, and I mean, that line of turning, hurt into hope, that the Conservatives have now sort of glommed onto, I think is a good one, quite frankly. But I don't know. It's just this, whether it's Kenney or whether it's O'Toole, or whether it's just like regular, political panel here and there talking about the far left and the far right as though they pose some sort of equal level of threat to our democracy is just absurd. And that's both what O'Toole and Kenney have done. I've sat on countless political panels where that is the dominant sort of narrative. And I just don't know why this needs to even be said. But like, if you are Indigenous and you're fighting for access to your unceded land, that's not the fucking same thing as a bunch of people throwing the world's largest hissy fit because they didn't want to wear a mask or get vaccinated during a pandemic, right? And so I've said this before, effective polarization is indeed a thing, and it is increasing, and that's bad because it, harms our political discourse, and it's clearly getting worse. But if we can't even recognize that in our current predicament, that the threat is coming, it's worse when it's coming from the far right, because they're way more mobilized, they're way more organized, and they certainly have ties to some way more worrying groups. Then like we're not ever going to be able to solve the problem because we can't even have an honest conversation about what the problem even is.
Can I also just maybe touch on something that might be obvious but maybe it's not, and that's that when in the context of F Trudeau flags, I don't know why we're not saying fuck. We have a podcast, we can say fuck if we want. So fuck. I can't say frickin' Trudeau. Anyway, I digress. But to automatically say, well, why are people so angry? Because they're hurting, and because mortgage payments are stinging, or they're inaccessible, property ownership dreams are evaporating, or they're utilizing the food bank. That's why they're so angry. Like, anger is not the de facto emotion for experiencing challenges in life, right? And I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not trying to be Brene Brown here, but I'm just saying that oftentimes you experience anger when you are being led to believe that factors at play are the fault of somebody else, and you believe the source of that allegation or the source of that information to be credible, and so you believe that to be the truth. And so the more strongly that Pierre Poilievre campaigns on the Trudeau-Notley Singh alliance, or the more that he talks about just inflation or these types of things, people that are experiencing global factors at play with things like cost of borrowing and inflation and everything else are going to believe that it is specifically the fault of Justin Trudeau. And so, damn straight, fuck Trudeau. But if you ask the average person with a fuck Trudeau sticker or flag on their truck or from their home or whatever else, exactly what it is that Justin Trudeau has specifically done to create the circumstance that they find themselves in, I'm not sure that you would get a lot of intellectually fueled answers.
No, but I bet you'd get a lot of conspiracy theory, disinformation peppered answers. And then you have to ask yourself, where are the folks getting this information from? And like, how is this information being propagated? And of course, a lot of that has to do with social media and algorithmic bubbles and the filtering of our reality. And, you know, folks having basically living in different realities at this point, and it only getting worse. And you have politicians that it really take advantage of that fact. And that's not getting us any nearer to a solution to this problem.
The only thing we've seen, though, that's guaranteed is that in this climate, anger can win elections.
Also, there's this.
All right, so I promise to be honest with you every episode. And my confession here, well, number one, I did what I set out to do, and that was steer as far clear as I could from devices and online chatter and all that through the holidays. And so like I had a basic working knowledge of what was leading the headlines, but I'm going to be honest, Supriya, I don't really understand this whole Andrew Tate story. To be really honest with you, I barely know who he is.
Yeah.
He, to me, is some guy that bragged that he had 33 cars, called out Greta Thunberg. She basically murdered him on Twitter. And then the next thing you know, he's in the custody of Romanian police facing like charges that are no laughing matter, including human trafficking. I honestly have no idea what's going on. Can you get us up to speed?
Yeah, that's a pretty good synopsis. But so what happened was on December 29th, Andrew Tate, who's like this manosphere influencer, blogger, whatever, was detained by Romanian authorities on sex trafficking and rape charges. So very, very, very serious charges. And
Right.
This was right after he had basically gone after Thunberg for some reason. And as you mentioned, she murdered him in front of the entire internet. And I'm not super familiar with him. I know a little bit about him. He's a former kickboxer. He basically found a lot of infamy online as one of these like top influencers in this toxic male ecosystem that make up that manosphere that I was talking about, you know, that really pump out a lot of misogynistic and anti-LGBTQ content aimed at younger millennial and Gen Z men. Or Gen Z, I guess, if we're in Canada. And like he was banned from Twitter in 2017 because he said that women should bear responsibility for being sexually assaulted. Of course, Elon reinstated his Twitter account in November when he took over the platform. He's been banned at various points throughout the last few years from YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok for, you know, making very similar anti-women remarks. Some of the things that he said is that, you know, women belong in the home. They are men's property. They shouldn't be allowed to drive a car. He said he prefers to date 18-year-olds because they're more impressionable and easier to, you know, are much more sexually submissive. So yeah, like not very good. But to your point about really not really knowing who he is, or me not necessarily knowing a ton about him, it's because we're not his audience. You know, we're not the demo that he's seeking out. But I can assure you that if you are a 12 to like 17-year-old male or female, you know who the fuck this guy is. And that I think is really dangerous, because if older folks don't know who he is, but all the younger folks do, how should we actually be talking to young boys about masculinity? Because it certainly shouldn't be from guys on the internet like this guy.
Yeah, this is like such a huge wake up call, and I know that I'm kind of Captain Obvious on this one, but when I see, you hear about attitudes like these, or I appreciate your background in giving us sort of a sense of some of the things he's said and positions he's taken, and then you look at the size of the audience that a person like this has, and it just freaks me out,
Yeah.
And those are one of the things like I said, I know this is an obvious thing to say, but that's one of the things I really wrestle with is like, who are these people? And what is this audience, and what drives? So, I mean, I'm sure that there's in some circumstances, almost like a morbid curiosity, right? Like I follow some people on Twitter I don't agree with per se, but this feels different. This feels like almost like a prophet and disciple type relationship that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And if you look at some of the disinformation and conspiracy theories that have now cropped up online because of his, charge and arrest, it's like, it is very much that. People do treat him like a bit of a prophet, and there's this weird sort of relationship there, and it's troubling. And in terms of like how he has the reach that he does, I mean, part of it is you maybe morbid curiosity, but we don't really know because none of these social media platforms or platforms like YouTube actually share how any of their algorithms work. But we know from, at least a few academic in investigations and journalistic investigations into this, that like the algorithms are a huge problem. So if YouTube knows, or if TikTok knows, or if, whatever knows that you are a 14-year-old boy, looking up, I don't know, tricks for a video game or whatever it is that 14-year-old boys may look up on YouTube, you do end up getting fed with this sort of content. And that's, that's why when Pierre Poilievre a few months ago was found to have been using that MGTOW tag, that men going their own way tag, that hidden tag on his YouTube videos for the last like 4 years. And he eventually stopped doing it once he was called out for it. But it's to capitalize on these sorts of audiences, and it was done for a reason, and it's I don't know, it's very weird that we're not talking about this more, and why it's so problematic. And quite frankly, if you are the conservatives, you should be just as concerned about this sort of thing as anyone would be on the left side of the spectrum, right? And we're not really seeing that.
Yeah. Would you agree that that whole story, because it was a FOIP request, right? That what ultimately blew the doors off that story, that the Poilievre team had been using that MGTOW hashtag on their YouTube videos. It was like a deep dive, right? It was investigative journalism. It wasn't like, because it wasn't like a visible tag, as I understand it.
No, you had to go into the video source code.
Yeah.
In order to see it. Yeah.
And actually, I might argue, I mean, just based on, and again, I just have a surface level understanding of the allegations that Dr. Jordan Peterson's making right now with regards to his license to practice. Is this right? Is a psychiatrist in Ontario, the college is saying he has to take, he's got a psychologist. Yeah, he's got to take like social media retraining something, or he's going to lose his whatever for things he's been saying, and he blows the doors off that. Describes it as breaking news yesterday from his Twitter account. But you saw who chimed in, right? Like Elon Musk comments on that, and it becomes this big thing. And of course, that's a big win for Jordan Peterson. And I almost wonder if that MGTOW hashtag story for Pierre Poilievre is like, when you get ordered by your employer, for folks that are still working for the man, to like pull down a tweet, and you don't mind doing it because the tweet already trended, it already did its work. Like the MGTOW tag did its work already for Pierre Poilievre. And now the fact that he's got to take it down, it's almost more of like the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. And it's problematic. The smile on my face is that I was once told to take out a tweet about an article Danielle Smith had wrote when we were both at Chorus, and I did not. But we can save that for another time. I
was once ordered to pull down a tweet about Mike Lindell and My Pillow.
Fuck. Yeah.
You can imagine how thrilled they were there when I digress. Water under the bridge now. We wouldn't be doing this podcast if it wasn't for getting fired. So at least me getting fired, you quit. You left of your own volition, which is a bit of a different story. Can we shout out your piece in the Star? People can check it out, thestar.com. I don't think it's too far of a leap based on what we were just talking about to your piece that came out on the eve of New Year's Eve. Stop prioritizing the profits of big tech over the mental and physical health of our kids. What would you like people to take from this?
I mean, the main thing is that in 2023, at some point, we're going to see online harms legislation be introduced and be tabled. And I just think the way we talk about it needs to get away from the surface level bullshit of any sort of regulation or any sort of reining in of big tech over our lives as like controlling the internet or censorship, because it's just wrong. And when we're talking about something as serious as the way people receive information and the sort of, way it has, the impacts that it has and the harms that it causes, the actual legitimate harms that these, algorithms can hold. I mean, like I've mentioned this before, but, it's been found from a journalistic investigation that like if you set up a TikTok account, within minutes, you can be bombarded with like self-harm content or posts on eating disorders. And like, it's, I don't know, like we're we're not talking about this in the right way. I think the Conservatives have very successfully managed to muddy the waters and managed to like make this about censorship and about controlling the internet. And I think a lot of that, again, is quite frankly bullshit. And we need to just talk about this sort of stuff better. And we need to also acknowledge that Canada isn't alone on this. The EU has already acted on this stuff, and the UK is in the throes of getting something done about this. And in the US, they're also talking about this in a much more bipartisan and serious way than they have in the last, few years. So this is where it's moving, because the reality is that we can no longer ignore the harms that big tech has unfurled upon us. And yet in Canada, for some reason, we're just like, censorship, internet, right? And it's just, I don't know, it's just annoying.
I know, but again, it comes back to what we talked about earlier. Once the conversation moves from how can we protect our kids and what do reasonable expectations of transparency look like from big tech, once the conversation moves from that, which is a bipartisan or nonpartisan conversation, over to Justin Trudeau wants to control what you can say on the internet, then it's a completely different tone. And we ask ourselves, why is everybody so angry? I appreciate you putting that on our radar. It's a great piece. People can check it out at thestar.com. Make sure you subscribe. Of course, independent conversations in media happen as well because of your support, and both Supriya and I are so grateful. Thanks for listening and downloading to this episode of Seriously. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. And of course, people can check out our website too.
Yeah, seriouslypod.com. And you can always check us out or send us email at talk@seriouslypod.com. We're on Supriya and Ryan at Twitter and seriouslypod on Instagram. Yeah, that's it. You did the whole gamut.
Yeah, we covered it. It's nice to see your face again, and we'll talk to you again in a week.
Sounds good, buddy.
Seriously is hosted by Supriya Dwivedi and Ryan Jesperson. Technical producer, John Hicks. Executive producer, Josh Dunford. Account coordinator, Lawrence Terlego. General manager, Katie Cook-Shivers. Human resources, Lena Shepard. Voiceover by me, Tangi. Seriously is a relay project. For more, check out seriouslypod.com.